Hi, Hi guys, how are you all today morning? Good morning. Today is 19th September 2023. My name is T.S.V. Raghavan and I live in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. This is my spiritual vlog on YouTube. Hardan, 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 Haribol, TRSV, Nectar, NECTAR, Nectar. In this particular vlog, in all my previous videos, we have been discussing about the knowledge and information that we have gleaned through the study of spiritual books, scriptures, contemplation on the material universe, and meditation on the spiritual universe. This particular video in this vlog is no exception to that rule. In fact, it is a mere continuation of all that we have been doing in all my previous videos. Kindly subscribe to this vlog and press the bell icon so that I may keep reminding you of all my previous and future videos. So let us continue with the topic for discussion for today's video. Today we are trying to analyze a very important term in spiritualism called astral projection. Actually, it is part materialism and part spiritualism. However, because it helps a person or a human, a living entity tread the path of spiritualism, hence astral projection is included in spiritualism. What is astral projection? To know this better, we will have to understand every average human living entity. Every average human living entity is actually a package of five things in particular. First is the individual spirit soul. Second, two, fifth are four layers of material body that envelop this spirit soul and make this spirit soul a human or any other living entity in this material world. These four layers are: the first layer, which is closest to the spirit soul, is causal body of intelligence and logic. It actually is directly or indirectly connected to the spirit soul but is a representative of the material world. In other words, this causal body of intelligence is the conduit between the rank material world and the spirit soul. Second comes the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. This is between the three subtle bodies that envelop this spirit soul and are material in nature. This astral body of mind connects to or answers to the emotional feelings and opinions of that particular living human entity. The third is called the etheric body of senses. These senses are five in number: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. The outlet for these five senses is in the fourth layer called the gross body. The gross body is made up of four material elements, namely air, fire, water, and earth. It also has five sense organs which give an outlet to the vibrations from the etheric body of senses into this material world. These five are as follows: two eyes for sight, two ears for hearing, two nostrils for smell, one tongue for taste, and the skin and genitals for touch. Thus, this gross body is only an instrument which acts according to the vibrations from the etheric body of senses, the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions, and the causal body of intelligence. Otherwise, this body as such has no other value except that this body is also used to identify any human or other living entity in this material world. The cell, algae, amoeba, weeds, creepers, creepers, plants, shrubs, grass, trees, ants, worms, insects, reptiles, amphibians, birds, bees, animals, reptiles, and human beings, all various species of a living entity in this material world, are identified by their respective gross bodies. We must understand this before proceeding further. The term used here is known as astral projection. It is not used as causal projection. There are three subtle bodies which have been mentioned in this video a little while ago. All these subtle bodies are made up of the first material element called ether. Yes, the quality of that ether may differ according to the subtle body. In other words, the causal body of intelligence has a different quality of ether than that of the astral body of mind or senses. Similar is the case with the quality of ether of the astral body of mind and the astral body of senses. Anyway, as I had mentioned before, the term used here is the astral projection and not the causal projection. While I was contemplating and meditating on this term, I realized, visualized, or deduced that the reason for this is because the causal body of intelligence is directly or indirectly connected to the spirit soul, which certainly is not material. Astral projection, though it takes one particular human living entity through the path of spiritualism, is certainly not totally spiritual. It is material in nature. In other words, the, the subtle and sharp cerebral faculties of a human living entity are projected into the space through astral projection. Astral projection is when a living entity who is interested in spiritualism wants to travel into this infinite space on his or her own without having the baggage of his or her heavy gross body. While this gross body, which is merely a dead instrument of the living entity, remains in this terra firma. In astral projection, the three subtle bodies vanish for the time being from this mundane material body into the space. The only difference is that there is one silver cord which is subtle in vision and which is attached to the umbilical cord of that instrument called the gross body, and this cocoon of three subtle bodies. This is because if that silver cord is snapped, that particular human living entity ceases to exist. In such a case, this mundane instrument called the gross body remains in the terra firma, and the package of three subtle bodies fly away independently into the space. To prevent this to happen, for the human living entity to experience this freedom yet be attached to this material world, This term called astral projection has been coined. In astral projection, this human living entity experiences this freedom partly and remains in the terra firma also at the same time. As I said, the package of three subtle bodies. For the time being, we will forget the first subtle body of causal intelligence and logic because it does not directly or indirectly affect this astral projection. This astral projection rules the mind, the feelings, the emotions, and the senses of a human living entity alone. Yes, the package may fly off, but in that case, this causal body of intelligence, which is already in touch with the spirit soul, decides to remain a mute spectator, just like that spirit soul of what is going on in the other two subtle bodies. In this case of astral projection, which is done easily only when this particular living entity is lying down, the body remains sleeping or dormant on the bed while these subtle bodies fly away into the endless space. The experience of such a human living entity is that of a person who is traveling fast into this tunnel leading to spiritualism. At most, such a person may reach the fringe or borders of causal intelligence, of logic, and they may not pierce that particular subtle body or the spirit soul. This astral projection is used by people to daydream or to dream or to fall into a trance where they enjoy all senses of the etheric body of senses or enjoy the romance, feelings, emotions, etc. that they would like to crave for and experience in person without having it affect their own gross body. I will give some examples to explain this further. Because astral projection is limited to the astral body and the etheric body alone, while the gross body remains in the terra firma prostrate and the causal body of intelligence is just a mute spectator. Hence, this particular living entity enjoys the first four Kundalini chakras of a human living entity without remaining in the gross body. What is Kundalini? Kundalini is a serpent of dormant energy which is lying tightly coiled and dormant at the base of the spinal cord of the gross body of a human living entity. I said dormant. I would like to add that it is also as subtle as the three subtle bodies. Further, there are seven chakras placed at regular intervals in the spinal cord of that gross body, which this Kundalini serpent pierces during its travel through the tunnel of the spinal cord of that gross body. These seven chakras are also as subtle and invisible as the Kundalini serpent of energy and the three subtle bodies. All these are made up of ether. In astral projection, this particular human living entity tries to activate his or her first Mooladhara, second Swadhisthana, third Manipuraka, and fourth Anahata chakras, because these four chakras are ruled by the etheric body of senses and the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. If a human living entity thinks about his or her Mooladhara chakra during astral projection, he or she visualizes becoming physically very strong, muscular, tall, well built, beautiful, pretty, attractive, etc. Every human living entity who visualizes this through his or her astral projection begins to dream that he or she is some world famous strongman, bodybuilder, wrestler, beauty queen, or international idol, etc. And this makes that particular person materialistically happy. On the other hand, if that same person thinks about the second chakra called Swadhisthana, his or her mood changes during astral projection. Swadhisthana in Sanskrit means delicious. This person wants to enjoy the five senses of the etheric body of senses through astral projection without taking any risk of physical contact of his or her gross body to any other in the society. This is known as fantasizing. You and I may be having some infatuation or lusty attraction towards something or some other human being. Something means some delicious food or fruit or sweets, etc., or some good looking star or idol who we may not be able to see personally, but we are attracted towards such a person. That person may be a star or an idol or an international icon, but for us in our astral projection dreams, we feel a closeness towards the same person without that person knowing that we are close to him or her. Such cases we lust for the love and attention of that particular star or icon of our own choice without physically getting in touch with that person. Moreover, though that person may be our own idol, but whether he or she is male or female, we do not know what that person is individually thinking about the world or about us. But here we need not bother about this. During astral projection, we get in touch with that person and enjoy his or her company to our fill or to our own satisfaction. In the case of Manipuraka Chakra, which is situated in the belly of a human living entity's gross body, we visualize about becoming very successful businessmen, magnates, tycoons, industrialists, share market experts, etc. We may not necessarily be that. We may be leading some mundane existence in some corner of the world, but there is nothing wrong in our fantasizing that we are that particular tycoon or magnate. We may have our own idols in these fields, and we may visualize being that person's associate in his or her profession without getting physically in touch with that particular person. Not only that, because the Manipuraka and Anahata chakra are directly connected to the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. This particular human living entity who is experiencing an astral projection may visualize something very creative and fantasize about this. Just like that human living entity fantasized about becoming a business tycoon or a magnate, the same person may fantasize about being some creative person also. Daydreamers who are artistically and creatively inclined make for this category, and they all belong to the Anahata or fourth chakra, which is above this Manipuraka chakra and is situated at the heart of a human living entity. Painters, sculptors, artists, writers, visualizers, and people who want to create something through their own performing arts without actually doing any writing, etc., may come into this category. However, this is also true with those who actually paint, sketch, sculpt, or do such acts of creativity. Music composition, writing, etc. come into the fifth Vishuddhi chakra, which is directly connected to the causal body of intelligence. Yet, the feelings and emotions that go into that creativity may originate in this astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. There are several storytellers or writers who compose soulful music or write very soulful stories or incidents through the Vishuddha chakra, but the thoughts that originate for such writing come from the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. Before going further, let me caution you that these things only affect the living entities in the material world. They have no use for those from the spiritual world. It is said that Veda Vyasa, the man who wrote Mahabharata or who is credited with authoring this Mahabharata, the great Hindu epic, did not categorize various characters according to what they are presented to this world today. His original characters were more logical and inclined towards spiritualism than how they were presented to this emotional world of feelings and mind. Thus, the heroes, heroines, and other such characters presented to us in the Mahabharata are very, very different actually in case of the original story authored by that great sage called Veda Vyasa. This is because Vedavasa was creative in writing and was more connected to his causal body of intelligence, logic, and to his own spirit soul. It is actually said that when Mahabharata was complete, even in his case, when it was not yet presented to the material world, Vedavyasa was not satisfied with his own creation called Mahabharata because initially he thought only logically and did not know when it had come to think like a body of astral mind of feelings and emotions, especially when the same Mahabharata was accepted by this mundane material world as an emotional saga. This sage Vedavyasa was quite distraught. Actually, he just wanted to talk about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, but he had miserably failed in doing so because his own astral projection and creative thinking had landed him knowingly or unknowingly, deliberately or otherwise, advertently or inadvertently, on the lap of the astral body of mind, feelings, and emotions. Thus, the final story of Mahabharata is very, very different from the actual logical and spiritual thoughts of sage Vedavyasa. So much so that Vedavyasa was now quite distraught because of the result, decided to write Srimad Bhagavatam, and, and he created several cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam only to eulogize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam is considered to be more logical and spiritual than the Mahabharata story itself, though in this material world, in the case of ordinary human living entities, whether male or female, this Mahabharata, which is a poor representation of its own creativity, ha- has been accepted by this mundane material world and made into an epic, much to the chagrin of sage Vedavyasa. This is what is known as astral projection. As I had mentioned before, astral projection does not include the causal body of logic and the spirit soul. It is limited to the mind, feelings, emotion, as well as the etheric body of five very material senses alone. It affects only these fields and the four chakras in the human living entity's body that are controlled by these two subtle bodies and their vibrations. Astral body is very helpful for every living entity to reach his or her path or milestone in his or her spirit, spiritual journey. In other words, when that living entity, whether male or female, decides to tread this spiritual path, astral projection comes in handy as a very good instrument to understand this world better than when the same living entity was entrapped into his or her gross body. Through astral projection, the same person can travel into this infinite space and understand at least his or her etheric body of senses, the astral mind, and the feelings and emotions of that particular human living entity. Once this person is able to live up to the standards of these two subtle bodies to saturation point, then the same living entity may leave astral projection and go towards causal body of intelligence and logic. The next step, however, is to identify himself or herself as not this body but this original unevolved spirit soul which is slowly getting evolved through endless journey of births and deaths in different species in this material world. When this happens, when this particular living entity identifies with himself as or herself as the spirit soul, then self realization happens to that person. The next step is for the same person to shake off this body of material, this material cocoon of subtle three subtle bodies and the fourth gross body, and to end his or her journey of endless birth and death in this material world. This process is known as liberation or moksha in Sanskrit. Once this living entity is self realized as the spirit soul and has shaken off this cocoon of four layers of material body and come out of this cycle of endless births and deaths, the final aim for that particular soul is to get delivered into the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the actual bull's eye or ultimate aim for every spirit soul in this spiritual world. We all should take astral projection as the initial stage or for taking the first few steps towards the causal body of intelligence and logic and self realization as the spirit soul. This must always be in our mind while we think about astral projection. This is all I wanted to say in this particular video. Kindly let me know what you think of my talk on this particular matter. Please give me your own expert opinions, thoughts, ideas, and views so that I may blend everything together for the sake of this society. Before concluding, let me remind you that I am also a published author with Amazon Kindle and paperback. I write on spiritualism, fiction, and assorted subjects. Spiritualism happens to be my favorite subject. Till we meet in my next video, it is good morning from TSV Raghavan.